Morning folks, Kevin here. Well, it's August 7th, 2017, and here we are, August 7th, and I don't think we've experienced summer more than just a few days here. The Keyhole gardens, those gardens, those rock bed gardens behind me, and I'm going to call this a Keyhole garden failure. And I'll go over the drawbacks or the pitfalls and the successes with it and what I would do differently in the future. So there are 3 of these Keyhole gardens. So what is a Keyhole garden? Well, they're basically garden beds that are raised beds that actually have excess little indentations like this one here, so that you can work a garden bed and reach around comfortably and work with whatever's you're growing in your Keyhole gardens. And for the most part, the concept and the materials that I used worked out fairly well. So this is one of the Keyhole gardens. This is another one. This one has 3 indentations in it. One right here that's hard to see because all the weeds growing up in there. One over here. And another one right there. And then I made cutouts for around the trees as they would get older and grow and all. And these are all rocks we picked up as I was doing work around the property. These Keyhole gardens were all created before I had the mini excavator. So I'd bring them in, I'd load them into the bucket of my tractor, right there. And I'd bring them in and I'd get them pretty close, and then I'd hand dig out the spots where each one of these rocks or boulders would go, and I'd set them in place. And some of them I'd set up on their sides, like this one. Some of them were too narrow when I set them up on their sides. Let me go around here. And I'd set them up, and they're pretty much flat rocks that I stood up on end, similar to that one there, but thinner in thickness. And I dig down and make indentations for them. So what worked well with these Keyhole gardens? Well, with the stone mass that was used as the borders around the edges, it created great little habitats and niches for the toads, various reptiles and amphibians, and small little mammals as well. And in some of the areas, lots of mason bee niches in there as well. So it created habitats. Another thing these using the field stone that I gathered was we get the morning sun coming from the east on that side of the property, which is coming down right now. And it would tend to heat up the stones, and they would hold more warmth. And my suspicion is, because of the snow melt around these stone walls, that we got a little bit of a season extension. We got a little bit of a jump start into spring, because the snow would melt around these areas. So those are 2 things that worked out quite well. The raised bed gardens, Keyhole gardens that we built here were originally, the soil level was right at the very top of this rock and mounded up some. So as you can look around, the soil has really consolidated and compressed down. And that has to do with how I constructed the beds. So, and the soil ended up being very nutritious, did very well, and really supported all the plants that we wanted to grow. So we grew strawberries in 2 of these raised beds, and we also grew herbs. So they worked pretty well. So we had a season extension, we had habitat. So what were some of the drawbacks? Well, as I mentioned, the soil was very high at the very top of these rocks around here, and it was mounded up so that I'd have plenty of soil in the future. But I did these as hugelkultur beds. So down below, it's all wood. Cardboard on the ground, and then wood on top of it. And over the last few years, that wood has really broken down, and the soil has really tended to consolidate and somewhat compress or compact over time. Now, it's not really compacted soil because we hadn't been walking on it more than usual, and it's had lots of worms in it, so it grew very well. But over the last couple years, we actually had a problem a few years ago. So I got laid up, I think it was 2012, and I was incapacitated for a couple of months. And unfortunately, some of the soil that we use to bring in the compost, and I'm using that in quote marks, I selected from sources that I actually paid for, and not all of it was paid for, but most of it was. But it really was either aged manure that was piled up and maybe occasionally turned, but it had plenty of weed seeds in it, and it had little rhizomes or root material from bindweed and quackgrass, two of the plants that were in there, and lots of seed from Pennsylvania smartweed. So when we first put this in, got everything started, got our strawberries and all, it did pretty well because they created quite a bit of shade. But the strawberries come on a little bit later in the season, and some of the herbs do as well. And as a result, the weed seeds would get started. And when we were able to come out, pick the weeds, and deal with it. But when I got incapacitated, Thea had to take on all the responsibilities of everything else, and so this just got let go. And all of those noxious weeds really took over and really occupied so much space that the beneficial plants that we put in here really were not able to survive as well. Also, the soil was receding. It was decreasing in the height. And I did not do a great job of building these walls. I did these pretty quickly. I took whatever I had at the time to build each bed. And if I were to do it correctly, if you look at the block wall, I would make, you see that each block sits on two blocks. So we have one block that's spanning two blocks. Every single one is like that. And I would have taken more time to actually create a similar situation instead of just stacking them the way that they are. And I didn't create a good solid base, make a pyramid-like wall structure. The soil actually helped to hold the rocks in place, and they were just leaning inward, and that allowed them to start to fall over. And we would just pick up the rocks as time went on, but it just didn't work that well. The more that the soil regressed or compacted down, the worse things got, and it really got out of hand when I was incapacitated. So I decided, well, I'm going to change the system. I created another video earlier this year with the herbed raised bed garden that's going up front, and I'll just peek around the corner here. So all the herbs, well, not all of the herbs, but many of our kitchen herbs are going to go out in this garden. And I use Bumblebee, the little mini excavator, to pull all the soil out. I've got a lot more work to do around here. I just went ahead and weed whacked in here because it's taken so long. So I got to deal with the weeds, but this is where a new Keyhole garden will go. And I'm not going to be putting a lot of woody mass down below for fear that it will continually consolidate. And if I were to do it, I would plan so there'd just be annual herbs in there for the first couple of years, acknowledging or recognizing the fact that that soil is going to shrink in volume as the woody material breaks down. So there's lots of benefits. So we got the habitat for the various species around that help with it. You get some thermal mass with the stones as well, but it's a real pain in the butt to weed or using weed whackers and all. And I want less work. With something, and with this shape of garden beds, it's harder than heck to throw tarps over it and do it easily to go ahead and do the occultation, actually killing the weeds as they germinate as well. So I thought about doing that, but I decided against it because it wasn't planned out that well. And with the next herb garden, the one that I just showed you the area up front, I'm planning that one so that if something happens and we need to shut the garden down for a year, well, we just do that. We let it go. So one, the composting that we're going to be putting in these beds is going to come from our site, compost that we create on site, so it's not going to have the rhizomes, it's not going to have all the weed starting material there. We're going to build the structure in a way that that we can easily manage or shut down as necessary as a result of whatever event happens where we're no longer able to maintain the system. So what's going to happen with all these rocks? Well, the big boulders are going out back in the shade garden by pond 3, and it's part of the water feature, some of the bigger rocks around here. The flat rocks will go to pond 2 for the spillway. I'll be reinforcing the spillway with the flat rocks that are here. So I thought I'd share with you this this failure that I had as a result of the Keyhole gardens, and I wanted to share this video so people can at least explore some of my negative experiences that I've had and thoughts that I've had about how I do it differently. I wouldn't be afraid of using field rocks again, but I would be very careful as to construct the walls and not make it so it's dependent on the soil material in the inner part to maintain it. I really do like them, the stone walls, but when you're creating all these little niches for wildlife to get into, you know, your toads and all, we have to consider those are places that plants are going to go in there, and if they end up being the non-desirable plants, well, that's something to deal with. So I thought I'd share my experiences, and I'm going to call this the Keyhole garden failure. I love Keyhole gardens. I'm sold on them. I want things that are going to work as well as possible. This didn't, so it's coming out. So I'm not sure what else will show up in this video. Maybe Bumblebee going in and helping me get some of these bigger rocks out. And I'm not sure how far I'll go over the next couple of days here. Supposedly we're going to have some more rain over the next few days, which hinders my ability to move these rocks. So thanks so much for watching, folks. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye now.